Hey guys, welcome to this week's FAQ and Freebie Friday. Now for those of you new to the channel, these videos are all about answering your health related questions. So if you have a question concerning your health, something regarding nutrition, diet, herbalism, Chinese medicine, or really anything related to health and wellness, and you feel that we could help you answer those questions, all you have to do is leave those questions in the comment section below, and we'll be answering those based on popularity. The questions we feel that would be most beneficial to the community as a whole, as well as the questions that we are capable of answering. Something else really great about these videos is that every week from the comment section, we select one lucky person to win a free bag of tonic herbs or medicinal mushrooms of their choice. However, if you don't have a question for us this week, but you'd still like to be entered to win some free mushrooms or herbs, all you have to do is make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already, give this video a thumbs up, and just drop any comment in the comment section below. And with all that out of the way, let's get to this week's questions. All right, so looking at our first question, this one reads, can you please advise on herbs for getting the kidneys healthy? My son's urine test shows protein in the urine. Thank you so much, VitaJing. All right, so as you already mentioned, excess protein in the urine could be an indicator that the kidneys are not functioning properly and potentially not filtering properly either. There's a couple of different things that might be going on though, other than just poor kidney function and filtration. Taking the issue a couple of steps back, one of the major issues that could be going on is the inability to digest and break down protein. So if the protein's showing up in the urine, that could be an indicator of two issues: the inability to break down that protein, but also, as you mentioned, unhealthy kidneys. They're not capable of filtrating any excess proteins in the body from protein metabolism. So looking at the most basic, what's probably going on underlying in this issue, other than perhaps poor kidney function, it could be as simple as poor digestion, and as we'll discuss in a moment, hypothyroidism. And these two things are usually interrelated. So my basic tips for this particular issue would be to simplify the diet. I'm not sure what your son's diet is necessarily. That would of course require like a one-on-one consultation or conversation. However, to give a few general pieces of dietary advice for improving overall digestive function and even kidney function systemically, the first thing I would recommend in optimizing the diet and making it an easier to digest diet would be to remove the polyunsaturated fats from your diet, as well as their sources, which are primarily grains, nuts and seeds, and legumes in some cases. So not only are these foods in general difficult to digest, but the polyunsaturated fats particularly are actually damaging to the pancreas, which could lead to improper protein digestion, as well as a host of other issues that you do not want. And it could be one of the primary causative factors. So these are very difficult to break down proteins because of the plant toxins that surround something like nuts and seeds and grains, as well as flours and those other things. But at the same time, the polyunsaturated fats are, again, directly damaging to a lot of the organs and impair metabolism, and over time can lead to a host of digestive issues. So they're not going to be breaking down, and that could be one of the major causes for the protein in the urine, is that you're eating these difficult to digest plant proteins that are not efficiently being broken down or metabolized. And that could put a major stress on the digestive system as a whole, and of course burden the kidneys over time. The second thing you might want to consider doing is keeping the protein intake between like 80 to 100 grams per day, depending on his weight, age, and size. Generally speaking, when the kidneys are healthy, they're not damaged by a more moderate, higher protein diet. But of course, if kidney function has decreased because of stress or hypothyroidism or a stressful, inadequate diet, then of course you're probably going to want to lower the protein intake, but not too much to the point where it starts to lead to liver issues and other health issues. In addition to that, looking at some easier to digest, more therapeutic proteins, I would recommend sticking to things like potatoes, even potato juice, fruits, well-cooked mushrooms, and anti-inflammatory proteins like gelatin or bone broth, depending on how severe his issues are. And generally speaking, animal proteins and shellfish are actually a lot easier on the digestive system than a lot of, again, the plant proteins, which are very difficult to digest. However, of all of the various protein sources I just mentioned, the potatoes and the fruits are actually although not really considered to be protein-rich foods, they're more or less considered carbohydrate sources of foods. They contain compounds that resemble amino acid structures known as keto acids. And these keto acids not only remove ammonia from the body, which tends to accumulate when the kidneys are not functioning properly, but those keto acids actually require little to no digestion and are more or less instantly metabolized. So that's a really good source of protein. The potatoes, the fruits, and mushrooms are good, easy to digest proteins as well. So maybe sticking to those for a short period of time and supplementing some good quality animal protein, especially the gelatinous cuts of the animal. So making things like oxtail soup, lamb shanks, or even bone broth or chicken soups could be really therapeutic as well. Moving along, as I mentioned briefly, hypothyroidism could actually be one of the major contributing factors to the impaired kidney function. So the thyroid hormone directly affects the physiology of the kidneys, and it particularly affects the rate of filtration of the kidneys. So generally speaking, the thyroid rules the entire metabolism, and the kidneys are part of the functioning of the metabolism. And again, their major job there is at least to filter. And when the thyroid is low, and there's not enough thyroid hormone, the rate of filtration of the kidneys can become weak. And this can, of course, contribute to excess protein in the urine, ammonia, and other disturbances in the body. So I would definitely recommend, if you're interested, having lab work done on the thyroid, since you've already tested his kidney function, but ask your doctor, instead of just looking at the TSH, to look at the T3, the T4, the reverse T3, and if you're really interested, have things like cholesterol, estrogen, and prolactin all measured too, because if your cholesterol is really low, if the prolactin and estrogen are really high, that's going to be a good indicator of hypothyroidism as well. So sometimes just improving thyroid function is going to improve the overall functioning of every organ in your body, especially something like the kidneys, and you can do that through very simple natural means in regards to modifying the diet. I talk a lot about how to do that here on the channel. So in addition to everything I've mentioned so far, definitely check out, at least after you've gotten the lab work to verify there's perhaps hypothyroidism, definitely watch our other videos on the best herbs for the thyroid. Generally speaking, herbs that are good for the thyroid also happen to be adaptogen herbs that lower stress substances, which directly damage and break down the kidneys and impair good digestive and metabolic function. But to answer your question in a few words directly, some of the best kidney tonics, looking at this issue systemically, are going to be herbs like cordyceps, Romania is a good one, as well as Ho Shou Wu. And then there's a couple of different other herbs that you can look into and learn more about if you watch this particular video here. All right, moving along, I'm going to answer this question, a very short question, but I think I've seen it come up a couple of times, so I'm going to answer it. It says, can you recommend a good TCM resource? So in traditional Chinese medicine, typically what happens is this is considered to be like a lifelong discipline. So obviously a lot of people here in the West don't really find a mentor in TCM and learn all of the trades, all of the philosophy, the different aspects of it, the different tools, and apply it in that fashion. However, that would be the ideal way to go about it. I've personally had mentors here and there, but I haven't necessarily gone through a rigorous, like start to finish completion discipline with a TCM practitioner. But if you're really legit about it, that would be the way to go about it. And you can find people online that are looking for this, people that devote their lives to learning about Chinese medicine and herbalism, and they want somebody underneath them. They want a student to teach them to learn the way so they can pass it on. It's a tradition, it's a culture or a way of life. So that would be the ideal way to go about it. You might be able to hop online and even find somebody who just might take you on as a mentor instead of, learning every aspect of it. If you just want to pick their brain, that's always a good idea. Obviously, all of our videos, this is, one of the points of this channel is that I've had mentors in this area, and I've read a couple of different really in-depth, amazing books that I'll share with you in a moment. And I just hop online as well, and I just research from various accredited universities. Different clinical studies too have been done on the application of TCM and herbalism to different physiological conditions. So one thing that I do personally, or more recently in the last 2 years, is I find a lot of the scientific research or the published medical journal literature on TCM or stuff that's been, pressed or published through a university, and that's always really good information in my opinion at least. But if you're looking for one single source, one book I'd highly recommend would be The Tao of Chinese Medicine by Kendall. This is one of the only books in my understanding that has been published, and while it was being created and published, was actually examined and verified by various experts in the field of traditional Chinese medicine, both for the terminology, the methods and applications, etc. So that's a great book, or a good starting point at least. All right, getting to our third question. This person asked for a solution or a remedy for swollen feet. Now, typically swelling in any area usually indicates inflammation and edema. Edema is the swelling of a particular area because the cells and tissues have been overloaded with water. And as I talk about in this video, which I would definitely recommend watching for more in-depth tips, this generally tends to occur under the presence of stress, and that stress is often caused by excess estrogen. And what estrogen does is it actually increases the cell's affinity to water. So the cell in this way can become overloaded with water, which leads to the swelling, but also the inflammation. So as I say so often in these videos, estrogen is more or less a class of stress substances. In fact, even studies have found that estrogen increases in response to stress. So not only does estrogen cause stressful conditions in the biology, but it also rises under stress, which for me just verifies its stressful nature. So one of the primary things you're probably going to want to focus on is lowering any excess estrogen in the body, as well as lowering stress overall. However, the stress could be caused by a variety of different things. It could be a physical trauma. If you've ever bumped into something, you'll notice that it tends to swell and get inflamed. So a physical trauma can be a stressor that leads to this condition, edema, and the inflammation that's present, but it could also be systemic stress, that if both feet are swelled up, I would imagine that it's systemic stress, unless, of course, you actually hit your foot on something. So again, definitely watch that video for some additional tips, but just to give you a few right now, one of the best things that you could actually do for edema and correcting all of the physiological imbalances associated would be to increase your intake of salt. Salt in many ways helps to stop the stress response associated with edema, but it also helps to reverse this overload of water to the cells, which is going to be obviously majorly beneficial. But again, definitely be sure to watch the other video that I made on correcting edema, which is again the swelling of a particular area. All right, so answering one and final question. This one basically reads, is there any TCM protocol or herb for helping people treat chronic pain and get them off heavy opioid medications? So the first thing I'm going to recommend is that you watch this video, because I actually dive into the whole subject of chronic pain on a bit more of a deeper level than I would here in this video. So that's going to be a very beneficial resource for you to check out. I think I even go into some of the natural herbal alternatives to opioids. And if I can recall from that video and the research, good quality turmeric extract actually, and curcumin in particular, the polyphenol in turmeric, was actually found to be just as effective at reducing pain as common non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So not quite as powerful, I think, as the opioids, but good enough to come close to correcting it as something like aspirin or some other, again, NSAID. However, although there's a ton of different controversial opinions and sort of an ideology around the use of aspirin, there's actually, I think, like 100,000 different studies on the beneficial effects of aspirin, everything from its ability to act as a powerful anti-inflammatory, as well as an anti-fibrotic substance that has been able to reverse liver fibrosis and cirrhosis. It's good for treating things like clotting issues, even good for treating dementia, Parkinson's, and a whole host of issues. And basically, from the research that I've seen and its physiological mechanisms, aspirin works very similarly to the way that vitamin K2 does in the body. And that's really the only downside to it, is that taking aspirin can deplete the K2 in your body. So as long as you're not overdosing aspirin and you're supplementing vitamin K2, it is an incredibly safe supplement. And a lot of the bad dogma around aspirin actually comes down to misunderstood research that basically confuses the toxic effects of acetaminophen. So things like Tylenol, ibuprofens, those sorts of anti-inflammatory drugs are actually directly toxic to the liver, whereas aspirin has the reverse effect. There's even a study, and I don't know if I can find it, I'll look for it and try to post in this video, that basically found that if you gave a mouse acetaminophen at the same time you gave it aspirin, that the aspirin could actually mitigate the damaging effects of the acetaminophen, as well as alcohol and other various sorts of toxic induced substances. So aspirin could be a really good way to come off heavy opioids, as well as the supplementation of vitamin K2, and again, some of those anti-inflammatory herbs. But again, you'd probably have to look at what's the cause of the chronic pain. You know, if it was a physical trauma, like a car accident, you know, then you're talking about maybe having to do some sort of physical therapy, as well as maybe even some psychotherapy to address the unconsciousness and the pain associated with the trauma, which can be a trigger. So I don't really know what's causing the chronic pain, but if you can figure out what's causing the chronic pain, then you can definitely address it. But I would say off the top of my head, using anti-inflammatory substances like curcumin or turmeric and experimenting with aspirin and vitamin K2, as well as addressing other sources of inflammation in your life or diet. So again, that would come down to me having to talk with that person directly to find out, is their pain due to chronic systemic gut inflammation that has spread throughout their body? Is it due to a physical trauma? Is it psychosomatic? You know, these are all things to take into mind, but looking at a basic protocol otherwise, definitely check out that video again for the TCM protocol. It discusses the view of pain from traditional Chinese medicine, and it gives some various tips from that point, basically invigorating the qi or improving circulation, probably lowering the stress hormone substances that can be very damaging and degenerative to joints and tissues, as well as some various herbal tips. So again, watch that video, and if you want some tips right now or some things to start researching, I would research the powerful anti-inflammatory effects of turmeric, aspirin, and vitamin K2. All right, guys, that brings this week's FAQ and Freebie Friday to a close. If you've enjoyed it and found it helpful, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. If you're interested in winning some free herbs or medicinal mushrooms, all you have to do is follow those cues, give the video a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and drop a comment or question in the comment section below. Also, remember to check out our blog and our online tonic herb shop for additional information and resources, or supplementing with any herbs I recommended throughout this video. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.